If you love intense HFY stories where humanity turns fear into strength, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next battle. Your support helps this channel bring you more powerful sci-fi stories full of emotion, strategy, and unforgettable human moments. For 42 years, humans and the Sarathi had lived close enough to stop counting the distance between them. Human engineers repaired Sarathi sky bridges. Sarathi physicians worked in hospitals over Earth's Atlantic cities. Children from both species learned each other's words badly at first, then better, then without thinking about it at all. There were still old people who remembered fear, old admirals who kept maps from uglier days, and noble houses that spoke of coexistence as if it were a disease. But most people had moved on because life has a way of making peace ordinary when it lasts long enough. Queen Alarin Sae believed in that ordinary peace more fiercely than anyone. She had opened trade schools, shared medical archives, and allowed human staff inside the royal mansion at Glassmoon, something her grandfather would have called weakness, and her people now mostly called normal. Her nephew, Prince Valar Sae, called it surrender. Valar never said that in public. In public, he smiled beside the queen, praised stability, spoke warmly of human partners, and placed his hand over his heart when children from mixed settlements sang both anthems in the palace gardens. In private, behind shielded walls and old family glass, he told Admiral Raven Keth and Admiral Thessa Vorn that the Empire had forgotten how to stand alone. She has made them love her softness, Valar said that morning, standing before a silent projection of Glassmoon Mansion. So we do not challenge her strength. We remove what makes her strong enough to continue. Admiral Thessa's face remained unreadable. The heirs. Valar looked at the three small markers glowing in the Eastern family wing. Her heart first, then her throne. Raven shifted uneasily. And the humans? Valar smiled without warmth. The Empire will need someone to hate when grief arrives. We will give them humans. Glassmoon Mansion sat under a clear lunar dome, all pale towers, hanging gardens, and soft violet reflections from the planet below. It was not a fortress by design. It was a home that had been gradually armored by history. Inside the Eastern family wing, Sergeant Mara Vale sat cross-legged on the floor with three royal children and a table full of colored memory tiles. She was not teaching them how to fight. That would have made the court too nervous and the children too proud. Officially, she was a human cultural instructor, assigned twice a week to help the heirs understand the species their mother trusted. Unofficially, Queen Alarin liked that Mara never lied to children and never bowed too deeply to adults. Prince Kael, the oldest, was arranging the tiles into a terrible map of Earth. Princess Neera was correcting him with great seriousness. Little Prince Orin had decided the Pacific Ocean tile belonged on top of the Himalayas because, in his words, blue is prettier there. Mara looked at the mess and said, I am going to apologize to my entire planet after this lesson. Neera smiled. Kael pretended not to. Orin asked, will Earth be angry? Mara answered, Earth has survived worse cartography. Tutor Sareth stood near the window, pretending to read from a lesson slate while listening more closely than he wanted anyone to notice. He had served 3 generations of royal children, and he had never fully trusted humans, not because he hated them, but because caution had been bred into the palace stones. Still, Mara had earned a kind of reluctant respect from him. She corrected the children without humiliating them. She let them ask foolish questions. And when Orin once cried because a visiting noble called humans temporary friends, Mara had not filled the room with soft lies. She had only said, temporary is what people become when they stop choosing each other. Sareth had written that down later, though he would never admit it. Now he glanced at the wall clock and said, your mother will call after the council inspection. Kael straightened. Will she ask about the trade speech? Probably, Mara said. So do not say you moved the ocean onto a mountain. The first wrong thing was not an explosion. It was the absence of sound. The mansion's low background hum simply stopped. No garden vents, no distant guard channel, no soft pulse from the inner communication ring. Mara looked up before the children did. Sareth looked up half a second later. His face changed, not into panic but into old fear remembering its own name. Neera noticed both adults and lowered the tile in her hand. What happened? Kael said. Power dip. Mara rose slowly. No. Power dips complain. She moved to the door panel and touched the side reader. Dead, not locked in the usual way, cut from the outside. Sareth crossed to a decorative cabinet, opened a hidden lower compartment, and pulled out a small bone-white transmitter. Mara saw it. Private line. He did not look at her. For the Queen, only for the Queen. He pressed his thumb to it. A thin green light flickered once, then vanished into the device. Whatever message it sent did not use mansion communications. Good, Mara thought. Someone had planned for betrayal before tonight. A dull boom rolled through the floor. The children went still. Orin grabbed Mara's sleeve. Kale tried to look brave and failed just enough to still be a child. From beyond the nursery corridor came 3 short cracks, 2 controlled for falling machinery and 2 close together for accident. Sareth stepped toward the door. Mara caught his arm. "Don't," he whispered. "The guards." She listened. No alarm, no running boots, no shouted orders, just silence settling back over the mansion after violence. That was worse than noise. Mara turned to the children. She did not give them a speech. She did not pretend this was a lesson. "Shoes on," she said. "No questions until we are moving." Kale swallowed. "Where are we going?" Mara pulled a chair beneath the old service vent near the book wall. "Away from the door they expect us to use." Another controlled blast sounded closer now. Sareth handed her the transmitter. "If I fall behind, keep this with them." Mara met his eyes and understood what he had already decided. "You are not falling behind unless you choose to." The outer nursery handle began to turn. Mara lifted Oren into the vent first and said, very softly, "Quiet now." The service vent was not made for royal children. It was narrow, dusty, and cold enough to make Oren shiver the moment Mara pushed him through. Nira climbed after him without complaint, though her fingers trembled on the metal lip. Kale went last, still trying to look offended instead of afraid. Mara pulled herself in behind them and reached back for Sareth, but the old tutor shook his head from the nursery floor. "I am slower than all of you," he whispered. "Then be slow behind us," Mara answered. The outer nursery lock clicked again. Sareth looked at the door, then at the children in the vent. His face softened. "Tell your mother I sent it." Kale's voice broke. "Sareth," the tutor smiled once, small and sad. "Obey Sergeant Vale." Then he slammed the vent grate shut from the outside and turned toward the nursery door just as it burst inward. Mara caught Kale before he could shout and pressed one hand gently over his mouth. Through the thin metal they heard Sareth speak in his formal court voice. "This wing is under royal protection." A stranger answered, "Not anymore." A pulse shot cracked the room apart, and the children learned what silence sounded like after someone loyal died inside it. Mara did not move for 3 breaths, not because she was frozen but because grief inside a narrow vent could become noise, and noise would kill the living. Oren was crying without sound, his whole body shaking. Nira's eyes were wide and wet. Kale stared at the closed grate as if rage alone could open it. Mara leaned close enough that only they could hear her. "We move now," she whispered. "For him." That got Kale moving. Not calmly, not well, but forward. The vent carried them above the family wing and into the older bones of Glassmoon Mansion, where the polished halls gave way to service shafts, pressure ducts, and inspection crawlspaces built before the dome was expanded. Below them the attack widened. Mara saw flashes through floor grates. Rebel soldiers in royal armor moved through corridors that should have been locked to anyone below captain rank. They were not searching blindly. They knew the wing. They knew the patrol breaks. They knew which doors mattered. "Those are mansion guards," Nira whispered. Mara looked through the grate at one soldier stepping over a dead loyal guard without slowing. "No," she said. "Those are uniforms." They dropped from the vent into a linen service room 2 levels below the nursery. Mara landed first, then caught Oren, then Nira. Kale jumped before she was ready and nearly fell into a cleaning rack. He jerked away when she steadied him. "Do not touch me." Mara let go at once. "Fine, stay close without being touched." He glared, but he stayed. They moved through a narrow servants' hall where the lights were still working, which Mara disliked immediately. If attackers controlled the quiet parts of the mansion, bright halls became invitations. At the first crossing she stopped and listened. No alarms still, no evacuation call, no queen's voice. Just distant impacts and soft controlled movement. Oren whispered, "Why is no one shouting?" Mara looked down at him. "Because whoever came here wanted the mansion scared before it knew it was allowed to scream." Kale swallowed hard. "My mother will come." "Yes," Mara said, "but we do not wait in the place her enemies expect her to look." Far above the mansion, Queen Alarin Sae received Sareth's signal in the middle of a coastal military inspection. It was not a message at first. Only one green pulse on a private wrist device she had not seen active in 7 years. Her body understood before her mind finished reading it. Sareth would not use that channel for fire, illness, or protocol failure. It existed for one reason only. The heirs were in danger and the mansion network could not be trusted. "Prepare my shuttle," she said. Admiral Ravenketh stepped forward too quickly. "Majesty, we should confirm the source before moving. Human systems have been known to mimic emergency pulses." Alarin turned slowly. "That device was built before humans entered this palace." Admiral Thessavorn added, smoother than Raven, "Then the danger may be internal. You should not return without a full fleet screen." Alarin's eyes went cold. "My children are inside Glassmoon. I am returning with or without your screen." Neither admiral argued again, but the delay had already cost minutes, and somewhere inside those minutes, Prince Valor Sae smiled at a message only he received. In the lower mansion, Mara reached the old garden tunnel and stopped at the sight of bodies near the arch. 2 loyal guards, 1 rebel. The rebel's armor carried the small crescent mark of the inner household, but the badge was too clean for field use. Freshly attached, Kale saw it too. That mark means he served our family. Mara crouched beside the body and removed a command chip from the dead rebel's wrist. Or someone wanted people to think he did. Nira's voice came small. Why would they kill us? Mara did not answer too quickly. Children knew when adults lied with speed. Because you matter to someone's plan. Kale's face hardened. We are not pieces. Mara looked at him then, really looked. Then do not let them move you like one. A sound came from the tunnel behind them. Not boots this time. Armor brushing stone. Mara pushed the children behind a fountain pump and drew the dead rebel's sidearm. 3 soldiers entered the tunnel, royal colors on their shoulders, weapons searching. One said, the tutor signaled, the human has them. Another replied, then kill her first. Leave enough of the children for the queen to recognize. Kale went white. Mara raised the pistol and whispered, now you understand why we are not taking the main hall. Then she fired. Mara fired twice before the rebels understood the fountain pump was cover, not decoration. The first shot caught the lead soldier in the shoulder seam and spun him into the stone wall. The second hit the weapon of the one behind him, shattering the rifle grip before he could raise it fully. The third rebel moved faster, diving behind a marble planter and returning fire in sharp blue pulses that cracked the old tunnel tiles. Mara pushed the children lower with one hand. Heads down, Kale whispered. You killed him. Mara kept her eyes on the planter. Not yet. You shot him. Different thing. The wounded rebel tried to reach his dropped weapon. Mara fired once more, close enough to make him stop moving without finishing him. Now he understands the difference too. Nira stared at her, frightened in a new way. Oren had both hands over his ears, shaking beside the fountain pipe. The third rebel shouted from behind the planter. Human, step away from the heirs and you may live. Mara shifted her grip on the stolen sidearm. Bad offer. Your species has already been chosen. I was not consulted. The rebel fired again. Mara used the flash to judge his position, then rolled across the wet floor and drove a fallen guard's shock baton under the planter gap. The pulse cracked through the stone base and hit his armor. He convulsed, dropped to one knee, and Mara was on him before he recovered. The fight was ugly and close. He was stronger than she expected, armored, trained, and desperate enough to bite through pain. His elbow caught her jaw. She tasted blood. She slammed the baton into his visor, then again into the exposed throat seal. He folded. The tunnel went quiet except for Oren's tiny broken breaths. Kale stood first, pale with anger and fear. You said humans came in peace. Mara wiped blood from her lip and checked the corridor. Most did, but they said your species was chosen. By traitors. How do we know you are not one of them? Nira whispered. Kale. He turned on her. She killed Sarathi guards. Mara did not correct him with soft words. I killed armed rebels wearing Sarathi colors after they said they intended to leave pieces of you for your mother. Kale flinched, but his distrust did not vanish. It only had nowhere clean to stand. Mara softened her voice. You do not have to trust me completely. You only have to keep moving until you have better options. Oren looked up through tears. Are there better options? Mara looked down the dark tunnel. I am working on that. They moved again, but the children no longer walked the same way. Nira stayed close, watching Mara and the walls both. Oren kept one hand near her coat without touching it, as if touch would decide something too large. Kale walked behind them, not in front, and Mara knew why. He wanted to see what she did when she thought no one was watching. That was fair. Fear had made better inspectors than protocol ever could. The garden tunnel opened into a service chapel built under the old mansion wing, a quiet room of pale stone, emergency candles and royal ancestor panels covered in dust. Mara stopped at the entrance, too clean, too quiet, a chamber made for hiding or killing. We go around. Kale suddenly pointed past her. No, those guards. 4 Sarathi soldiers stood at the far door. One lowered his weapon immediately. High heirs, he said warmly. Thank the moons, come with us. We have orders to bring you to your mother. Oren stepped forward first because he wanted the words to be true. Nira grabbed his sleeve. Kale looked at Mara, then at the guards, then back again. The lead guard knelt, perfect posture, gentle voice. Prince Kale, Princess Nira, Prince Oren, you are safe now. The human has done enough. Mara did not move. Who sent you? The guard's eyes stayed on the children. Captain Valor Thane. Mara had heard that name from Sarath once, loyal palace guard commander. Still, names were easy to steal. Emergency phrase. The guard finally looked at her. You have no authority to demand palace codes. Kale's face changed. He wanted to believe them. He needed to. The guard opened his hand. "Come, Highness, your mother waits." That was the mistake. Nira whispered, barely audible. He called him Highness. Mara heard her. Kale heard her too. In emergencies, Sareth had called him First Crown. The wrong title fell between them like a dropped blade. The lead guard saw the recognition and stopped pretending. "Take them." Mara shoved the children back as the guards moved. She fired once, missed because Kale was too close, and took a pulse round across the side of her ribs. Pain tore through her. She stayed standing. The second guard lunged for Oren. Kale moved before Mara could. He grabbed an emergency candle stand and swung it with both hands into the guard's knee. It did not break armor, but it broke timing. Mara used that broken second, slammed the shock baton into the guard's helmet, and pulled Oren behind her. Nira dragged her younger brother toward the chapel benches. "Go low," Mara snapped, "behind stone." This time they obeyed without argument. The fight filled the chapel with flashes and echoes. Mara was outnumbered, wounded, and forced to fight small because children were behind her. She could not retreat fast, could not throw blind shots, could not let a single guard cross the center aisle. One rebel cut her forearm open with a blade. Another slammed her into an ancestor panel hard enough to crack the stone behind her. Kale screamed her name before he could stop himself. Mara drove her knee into the attacker's abdomen, hooked his arm, and used his weight to block a rifle shot meant for her chest. The rebel dropped. The last guard backed toward the far door, raising his weapon toward Nira. Mara had no clean line. Oren did. The youngest prince, shaking so hard he could barely stand, threw the memory tile he had kept in his pocket from the lesson room. It struck the guard's visor with a tiny useless click. Useless except the guard blinked. Mara fired through that blink. When it was over, Mara lowered herself to one knee because standing had become optional and she had chosen not to. Blood ran under her coat. Kale stared at the dead rebels, then at her. All the accusation had drained from his face, leaving only horror and understanding. "You came back," he said. Mara pressed a hand to her ribs. "I never left." Nira knelt beside her. "You are hurt." Mara nodded once. "Yes." Oren crawled out from behind the bench and pressed the fallen memory tile into her hand as if returning a weapon. "Did I help?" Mara closed her fingers around it and looked at him. "You gave me a second," she said. "Sometimes that is the whole fight." Queen Alarin Sae returned to Glassmoon Mansion through smoke, rain, and the sound of lies. Her shuttle cut down through the lunar storm without waiting for full clearance, its landing claws striking the eastern platform hard enough to make the dock crews scatter. The mansion below was not burning everywhere, which somehow made it worse. Parts of it still looked perfect. The glass towers still glowed. The garden lights still shimmered under the dome. But entire wings were dark, and where there should have been guard calls, evacuation bells, and layered command chatter, there was silence. Ilarin stepped from the shuttle before the ramp fully touched down. Captain Valor Thane met her at the platform with blood on one side of his armor and shame in his eyes. "Majesty," he said, "the family wing was breached." Ilarin's voice was very quiet. "Where are my children?" Thane hesitated for half a breath too long. "We do not have visual confirmation." Behind him, Prince Valor Sae arrived with 2 admirals and the grief of a man who had rehearsed it in advance. "Aunt," he said softly, "you must prepare yourself." Ilarin turned toward him. "Do not call me that until my children are found." Valor lowered his eyes, playing wounded loyalty beautifully. Admiral Raven Keth stood beside him, rigid and grave. Admiral Thessavorn had already brought a tactical slate, its surface filled with selected images. Mara leaving the lesson room with the children, dead Sarathi soldiers in the lower tunnel, human blood traces near the family wing, and broken mansion feeds that made every truth look like a confession. The human instructor removed the heirs from their protected chamber, Thessa said. Several loyal guards were later found dead along her route. Captain Thane looked sharply at the slate. "Those feeds are incomplete." Valor turned on him with cold patience. "Everything is incomplete because humans cut the mansion network." Ilarin's fingers curled once, then stilled. "Sergeant Mara Vale had no access to the mansion command core," Raven answered. "Human sabotage does not always require official access, Majesty. Their engineers have worked in our systems for decades." Ilarin looked at him then, and something in his face almost moved. Almost, and yet Tutor Sareth's private signal reached me before any official alarm. "Explain that." No one answered quickly enough. That was the first crack. Ilarin lifted her wrist device. The bone-white pulse Sareth had sent still glowed faintly, a private emergency line built in the old reign, long before human engineers ever touched the palace infrastructure. "This signal was triggered from the children's wing before the mansion network went dark," she said, "before the public alarms, before any human accusation reached me." Sareth believed the threat was already inside. Valor's expression tightened by a hair, or the human forced him. Thane stepped forward. Sareth died in the lesson chamber. We found Pulse scoring near the nursery door. He stood between the attackers and the vent access. Alarin closed her eyes for 1 second, only one, and when she opened them, grief had become command. Then stop showing me what proves your theory and show me what proves the truth. Valor bowed. Majesty, delay helps the enemy. Alarin's gaze cut to him. So does certainty purchase too quickly. Below the mansion, Mara Vale was running out of blood and patience in nearly equal measure. The old service chapel had not been safe after the fight, so she moved the children into the moonwater recycling level beneath it. The chamber was wide, cold, and half-flooded, built around silver channels where filtered water moved under glass grates. Pipes climbed the walls like frozen vines. It smelled of minerals, old machinery, and fear. Mara locked the entry hatch manually, then slid down beside a pump housing before her legs betrayed her. Nira reached her first. "You are bleeding through your hand." Mara looked down at her side. "That means my hand is in the right place." Kale took a fallen shock baton from the chapel fight and stood near the hatch with both hands around it. His face was pale, but he did not back away. Orin knelt beside Mara and pressed a folded curtain strip against her wound. His small hands shook. "Do I press hard?" Mara nodded. "Hard enough to annoy me." He pressed harder. She hissed, "Good, very annoying." Kale looked at her differently now, not fully trusting, not easily comforted, but no longer accusing. "I ran from you." Mara leaned her head back against the pump. "Yes, that nearly got us killed." "Yes," Nira glared at her. "You could lie a little." Mara's mouth twitched despite the pain. "I could, but he would know." Kale swallowed. "Why did you come back?" Mara looked at the hatch, listening for footsteps. "Because children run from the wrong people during terror. Adults are supposed to keep up." Orin whispered, "Are you going to die?" For the first time, Mara did not answer right away. Nira noticed, Kale noticed. Mara forced her voice steady. "Not before your mother hears the truth." Nira turned at once toward the old control panel half buried in the wall. "Sareth's signal," she said. "There may be another line." Mara looked at her. "Can you use it?" Nira wiped her face with her sleeve and moved to the panel. "I watched Sareth open old systems during history lessons." He thought no one noticed. Kale gave a shaky breath. "You notice everything." "Someone has to," she said. Her fingers moved over dead keys, then under the panel lip where the manual relay sat. Sparks spat once. Orin flinched but did not stop pressing the wound. Mara kept her eyes on the hatch. "Fast, Nira." "I know." The panel flickered green, then white. Somewhere inside the wall, an old transmitter woke with a thin, tired hum. In the mansion command hall, Queen Alarin's wrist device lit again. Static broke across the private channel. Then Nira's voice came through, small, frightened, and alive. "Mother, lower moonwater level. The human is protecting us, Valor's men." The signal cracked violently. Alarin stepped toward it. Nira, answer me." Only static replied. Then the line died. The command hall froze. Prince Valor's face lost color for one unguarded second. Alarin saw it. So did Captain Thane. So did Admiral Thessa, whose hand drifted too quickly toward her sidearm before she stopped herself. Alarin lowered her wrist slowly. When she spoke, her voice was no longer grief. It was judgment. "Captain Thane," she said, "take only guards you trust. We go below." Then she looked at Valor, and the silence around him finally became dangerous. Prince Valor moved before the Queen could. He had lost the clean version of the plan the moment Nira's voice reached the private channel, but clean plans were luxuries for people not yet cornered. He stepped into the side corridor, touched the hidden command ring under his sleeve, and opened a line to the last team still loyal enough or bought enough to answer him. "Moonwater level," he said. "The heirs are alive. The human is with them. End it before the Queen reaches them." A voice answered through static. "And if the Queen's guard arrives first." Valor looked back toward the command hall where Alarin was gathering only those she trusted. "Then make sure she finds enough blood to stop asking questions." Below in the Moonwater chamber, Mara Vale felt the attack coming before she heard it. The silence changed. It became tight. It became aimed. She lifted one hand from the wound at her side and pointed to the far pipe stack. "Kale, behind that rail." "Nira, panel." "Orin, stay low." Kale tightened his grip on the shock baton. "I can fight." Mara looked at him. "You can survive. Start there." The first rebel cut through the upper hatch without warning. Not a breech blast this time. They knew the children were close and wanted bodies recognizable. The hatch peeled inward and a black-armored soldier dropped onto the wet platform. Mara fired once from the floor. The shot missed his chest but struck the valve housing beside him. Steam roared across the chamber in a white wall. "Now," Mara snapped. Nira slammed both hands onto the old panel and released the lower channel gates. Moonwater surged through the glass trenches, flooding the center walkway ankle deep. The rebel slipped, recovered, and raised his rifle toward the children. Kale moved exactly when he should not have and exactly when Mara needed him to. He threw the shock baton hard. It hit the man's visor and made him turn. Mara used that turn, dragged herself upright against the pump housing, and shot him through the side seam. He went down into the water with a heavy splash. More came through, 3 from the hatch, 2 from the lower maintenance door. Mara knew at once they were better than the first teams. No wasted speech, no threats. They entered with overlapping angles and low weapons, letting the room's machines take cover away from her piece by piece. She backed the children toward the old filtration wall, every step leaving blood on the silver floor. Oren saw it and began crying again, angry at himself for it. "I am sorry," he whispered. Mara caught his shoulder and pushed him behind her. "Do not apologize for being alive." A rebel shot shattered the pipe above them, spraying cold water across the wall. Nira shouted, "Left door is still powered." Mara understood. "Seal it when they cross." The first 2 rebels rushed the lower door, trying to flank. Nira waited until one was through and one was not, then slapped the panel. The emergency shutter dropped between them with a brutal metallic crack. One rebel was trapped outside. The one inside turned too late. Mara took him down with the last clean shot in the pistol. Then the rebel captain entered through the steam. He was tall, armored in old royal black, and carried no rifle, only a short pulse blade glowing blue along the edge. "Sergeant Vale," he said, "you have cost us too much time." Mara let the empty pistol fall and picked up the dead rebel's knife with her left hand. "Send a complaint." He glanced at the children. "You cannot keep them. This house already sold them." Kale stood behind Mara, pale but furious. "My house did not," the captain smiled. "Your bloodline did." He lunged before Mara could answer. She met him halfway because waiting would have let him choose the rhythm. The first strike cut across her forearm. The second slammed into the knife hilt and numbed her fingers. He was stronger, fresher, and uninjured. Mara had training pain and 3 children behind her. That was enough to keep her moving, not enough to make it easy. Oren remembered the first lesson from the memory tiles, not because it was survival training but because Mara had made him count colors when he was nervous. Blue meant earth ocean, white meant mountain, red meant stop. He saw the red emergency lamp beside the filtration valve and hit it with both hands. The chamber lights flashed scarlet. For 1 second the rebel captain's visor adjusted. 1 second was all Mara needed. She stepped inside his guard, drove the knife under his arm plate, and shoved him backward into the open water channel. Kale struck the exposed blade handle with the shock baton, forcing it deeper. The captain gasped, tried to rise, and Nira opened the upper pressure release. A blast of moonwater hit him hard enough to slam him into the grate. He did not get up. Mara lasted 3 more steps after the fight ended. Then her knees failed. The children caught her badly, all elbows in panic, but they kept her from hitting the floor. "Do not sleep," Oren begged. Mara tried to answer and only managed a breath. The main chamber doors opened under royal override. Queen Alarin entered with Captain Thane and loyal guards behind her, weapons raised. For 1 terrible heartbeat she saw dead Sarathi soldiers, water stained with blood, and a human holding a knife near her children. Then Oren stepped in front of Mara, small, shaking, and fierce. "Don't hurt her," he said. She kept the silence away. The queen lowered her weapon first. Everyone else followed. For a moment after Oren spoke, the Moonwater Chamber did not belong to soldiers, rebels, queens, or empires. It belonged to a frightened child standing with both arms spread in front of a wounded human who could no longer stand. Queen Alarin Sae looked at her youngest son, then at Kale, then Nira, counting them the way only a mother counts, not as heirs, not as symbols, but as breathing pieces of her own heart returned from the edge. Captain Thane lowered his weapon fully. "Secure the chamber," he ordered. Loyal guards moved around the bodies, careful not to step between the children and Mara. Alarin crossed the blood-wet floor and knelt. Oren collapsed into her arms first. Nira followed with a broken sound. Kale lasted 1 proud second longer before he folded against her side. The queen held all 3 tightly, but her eyes stayed on Mara. "Sergeant Vale," she said, voice unsteady beneath its command. Mara tried to answer. Nothing came out. Oren turned sharply. "She needs help." Alarin looked at her medic team. Now, the chamber came alive after that, and the sound of it felt strange after so much silence. Medical seals hissed. Guards called routes clear. Water pumps groaned back into motion. A loyal officer reported 2 surviving rebels in custody. Mara drifted in and out while hands pressed bandages against her ribs and sealed the cut along her arm. She heard pieces of truth forming above her. Nira telling Captain Thane about the wrong titles. Kale saying, "I ran from her. I thought she was taking us. She still came back." Oren repeating that Mara had told them where to hide and when to move. Thane listened to every word and his face hardened more with each sentence. "The attackers used inner command access," he said finally. "No rebel unit gets this deep without a royal key." Alarin rose slowly, still holding Orin's hand. "Then we find whose key opened my children's doors." The answer was waiting in the mansion's own bones. Tutor Sareth's private signal had carried more than a distress pulse. Before he died, he had attached a fragment of the nursery corridor feed, too short to save him, long enough to show rebel soldiers moving before any human alert existed. Neera's second signal had marked the Moonwater level. Captain Thane's team recovered the command logs from the old relay and matched them against door access records. One name appeared again and again where it had no reason to be: Prince Valor Sae. Alongside his access were military delay orders signed by Admiral Ravin Keth and Admiral Thessa Vorn, both marked as emergency containment directives. Alarin watched the evidence in the command hall without speaking. Valor stood across from her, still wearing grief like a cloak. "Aunt," he said carefully, "the records are corrupted. Humans have touched these systems for decades." Alarin looked at him then. "Sareth's line predates human access by 90 years. His face tightened. That was the moment his mask failed. Ravin reached for his sidearm first. Thessa moved almost at the same time. Captain Thane had expected both. Loyal guards struck them down before either weapon cleared its holster. Valor stepped back, anger finally burning through his careful sorrow. "You gave the Empire to outsiders," he said. "You taught our children to trust humans before their own blood." Alarin's voice became colder than the glass towers above them. "No, I taught them to recognize loyalty wherever it stands." Valor pointed toward the lower levels where Mara was being carried toward the medical wing. "That human killed Sarathi soldiers." Kale, standing beside his mother with blood still on his sleeve, answered before the queen could. "They were not ours." Neera lifted her chin. "They used our words wrong," Orin whispered. "They made the palace quiet." Alarin looked at Valor one last time. "You did not try to save the Empire. You tried to own its grief." Then she gave the order. "Arrest him." Glassmoon Mansion began to sound like itself again before dawn. Not the old way, not completely. Too many corridors were burned. Too many loyal guards were gone. Sareth's room would never be opened without someone pausing at the door. But the mansion was no longer silent. Boots moved with purpose. Repair crews shouted across broken panels. Children cried openly. Medical teams called for supplies. Somewhere in the garden wing, a damaged fountain restarted in uneven bursts, and the sound made Neera laugh and then cry harder. In the recovery room, Mara woke to low light and the queen sitting beside her bed. Alarin was not wearing a crown. She looked tired enough to be real. "My children told me what you did," she said. Mara swallowed against a dry throat. "They did most of the surviving themselves. They also told me they doubted you." "Good," Mara said. "Fear should ask questions." Alarin's eyes softened. "Why protect them after that?" Mara turned her head toward the three sleeping forms in the next room. "Children do not owe adults perfect judgment during terror. Adults owe children another chance." The public honor came later, when Mara could stand with help and hated every second of it. Queen Alarin named her keeper of the small crown before the repaired inner court, not as decoration, but as record. Humans and Sarathi watched together as the children stood beside Mara instead of behind the throne. The palace had fallen silent during the attack, but the truth did not. It returned in voices, footsteps, testimony, and the steady breathing of three children still alive, because one human had kept moving when every official system failed.